Oliver was holding a grasshopper in her hand in a field. The American poet, looking at this little grasshopper, wondering this question: what is it that you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? And for me, it's an incredibly important quote because it sets us all on a path of questioning, what is it that we do? About 6 years ago, right before Thanksgiving, I was with my two, at that time, teenage, getting ready for Thanksgiving, going shopping. And in the store, in the frozen food section, we saw this. Products of Mexico, Greece, Peru, Costa Rica, Chile, packed in Canada and sent down to San Francisco. And that is 3 continents in one frozen bag. Around the table, we were talking about the state of the world. I was talking specifically about a book by Jared Diamond, Collapse. He poses a question: how societies choose to fail or succeed. The key word here is choice. And he looks at the analysis and says, well, there are a few factors which are very clear. And we were talking at the dinner table around environmental damage, loss of biodiversity, the oceans. We're talking about the population growth, growing, climate changing, hostile neighbors between nations, the fracturing of our societies around the world, as well as trade beginning to disintegrate. And then my daughter turns to me and she looks at me with tears in her eyes and says, Papa, you can't give up. This is the only world I have. Now, as a father, that changed everything for the next bit of my life until I die. My name is Chris Luebkeman, and I had the privilege and the pleasure of traveling around the world looking at our planet from the sky, visiting different places, seeing what we have done as humans to not just craft and sculpt places to survive, but for places for us all to thrive. To look at the houses, the housing, the conversion of these geometries, the conversion of our deserts, of our farmlands into habitat. The farming of our planet, be it for grain, be it for food, be it for fish in the oceans, or perhaps the circles for protein, or for minerals, for energy, for wood, for palm oil. One thing is quite clear to me is that change is constant. We cannot stop change. We can't gate it away, wish it away. It is here, it is happening. The second thing that we know is the future is always oversold and is underimagined. And the third, which I've learned, is that participation is what shapes this world. Now, if we think back to 1968, when I was just a very, very young lad, Hal came out onto the stage of the world in big screen. And he said very specifically at one scene, I'm sorry, Dave, I'm afraid I can't do that. Dave was outside, wanted to get back in, because Hal, what we would call today an artificial intelligence, had locked him out. Now, that part's not the interesting thing to me, nor the fact that this was all written on a typewriter like this, which was high tech at that point. Very cool typewriter, but that's not the really interesting thing to me, but it's this. The fact that the astronaut was talking to his daughter on a video conference, which didn't exist really at that time in the public sphere, because I too was talking to my children very often with the most engineered little Apple item at that time, the eyesight, from all over the world. Now, 2001 had already thought about and looked at the work that was being done in the Bell Labs, the picture phone in the mid-60s, which was based on more theoretical, fantastical work in the early 60s at AT&T for the picture phone. And that was also not the first time that two groups were trying to talk to each other. The German National Post did this in the 1930s. Already on the 1st of March, the first video conference in the public sphere that you could buy the time between Berlin and Leipzig. That was not the first time that was thought about. Fritz Lang, talking between the upper world, the lower world, and Metropolis, the video phone at that time, that was also not the first time. In the 1870s, Edison had already thought about in the labs, how could families talk to each other? This is already in the 1870s, this issue of connection. Now, it wasn't just only on the American side of the Atlantic, but also on the European side of the Atlantic. It was also being thought about connectivity, and here between Paris and the colonies. Now, as a futurist, one of the things that we think about very often is something called the futures cone, where we are standing in the now, looking out to the future, and quite frankly, there's a cone out there of possibilities. It's enormous for each and every one of us. But there's also a point in the middle, which is the probability, where we most likely will land, and that is not necessarily our preferable future, where we hope to land. And that preferable future is where we make our choices. Now, it's very interesting to continue to think the future's oversold and is underimagined when we go back to one of the first big science fiction films I recall seeing on the big screen, 1982, was Blade Runner, which was supposed to be life in 2019. Now, I'm not sure about where you live in the world, but this is not the world here in Zurich, right? Nowhere do we have zooming cars, replicants running around, or big screen TVs everywhere. The future is always oversold and underimagined. That if we go back to the late 19th century, they were already thinking about, with fantasy, what the future could look like. This crazy idea that one day we'd have some automatic thing which would sweep up your rooms. And this was also already in the 50s, existing, not just the Roomba. Or this incredible idea that you could have airplanes in a time when only had balloons throwing torpedoes down in war. Or this idea we'd have electronic music or an orchestra without people. That was crazy to imagine. Or that we could even have homes rolling around the countryside. Or, heaven forbid, schools where the content is beamed into your head somehow. Now, the future is always oversold and underimagined with this cone of the possible, this imagination of what could be. But it's not just technology that's to think about here. It's also in our natural world. This is the Rhone Glacier, the beginning of the Rhone River, one of the key lifebloods that goes through Europe. The two little circles on the left give you a scale of people. The big circle on the right is a tunnel into which you can go inside of the glacier. And you can listen to time dripping away. You feel it when you're inside of this glacier. Now, this glacier is melting. When I lived in Switzerland in the 80s, this lake did not exist. In my short lifetime, it has already retreated. And I know this not because I have perfect memory, because when I visited that glacier a few years ago with my son, he was standing on the foundation of the bridge which went into that tunnel, which I showed you. There's a plaque on the side which says, "This is the foundation." In my lifetime, it has retreated, and in my lifetime, if I live until 2050, the largest glacier in Europe will also disappear, the Aletsch Glacier. How is that possible? Change is constant. The future is oversold and it is underimagined. And finally, participation is what shapes our world. Well, not just the parties, but also global participation with the SDGs, agreeing to take action. Or this, the individual action of an individual, oh, wait a minute, that's the dog, not the individual, pooping into a plastic bag. What the heck, right? Then you walk over to the garbage, he reaches down, takes the bag off, and puts it into the garbage can. Now, you might have noticed that she is visually impaired. And she and her community decided to participate as an individual in an important act in Australia, which is you are responsible for what your dog does. You take care of your blank. Participation and choice is what shapes our world. What becomes laughable is now laudable. And this, just a few weeks ago, is lamentable. These humans were not visually impaired. Change is constant, the future is oversold, underimagined, participation is what shapes our world. And I want to close with a short poem which I wrote for my best friend who I met in Switzerland in the 80s. David, an architect who almost 5 years ago to this day died at a heart attack at his drawing board. And it's entitled, Choosing to Matter. Ready or not, one day it all comes to an end. There will be no more sunrises, no more minutes, hours, or days. All the things you collected, whether treasured or forgotten, will pass to someone else. Your grudges, your resentments, your jealousies, frustrations will all finally fade and disappear. So too your hopes, your fears, your ambitions, plans, and those endless to-do lists. It won't matter where you came from or what side of the tracks you lived on at the end. It won't matter whether you were beautiful or brilliant, tall or short. So what will matter? How will the value of your days be measured? What will matter is not what you bought, but what you built. Not what you got, but what you gave. What will matter is not your success, but your significance. What will matter is every act of integrity, compassion, courage, or sacrifice that enriched, empowered, or encouraged others to emulate your example. What will matter is not how many people you knew, but how many will feel the long-lasting loss when you are gone. What will matter is not your memories, but the memories that will live in those who loved you. Living a life that matters doesn't happen by accident. It is not circumstance. It is not happenstance. Living a life that matters is a choice. We should all choose to live a life that matters. We choose what we do every single... Thank you. Thank you. We make choices every single day from the moment we get up. How do we make those choices? Like my son coming to visit me, to see the glaciers, to see this beautiful country of Switzerland. He has a vision. My daughter has a vision. Each one of us have a vision of what's possible, what's probable, and hopefully what's preferable. Papa, you can't give up. It's the only world I have. She is right. We can't give up. But she's wrong. Because it's not the only world she has. It's the only world we have. So I close with the same slide I opened. What is it that you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Well, I am choosing to matter. I hope you will as well. Thank you. Thank you.